Astrology Original Ponderings Diary. So, this is, of course, a series in my astrological literature. I have so many hundreds of videos. I'm just going to jump right into this because I'm very excited. And this isn't the only Advanced Astrology Original Ponderings Diary we're going to go over. There is going to be another one. So, what we're going to look at here is private working notes of the faculty, right? The hypothetical Advanced Astrology faculty. Professor Hilaire Voss, Chair of Evolutionary and Harmonic Studies, Celestial Faculty, Astral Academy of the Inner Sky. First, I want to give a shout out to Claude and Tropic for helping craft this document. The chart is not a map of fate, but a living conversation between the soul and the geometry of becoming. This is volume 1, working manuscript, not for circulation. So, first entry is secondary progressions as lived time. Now, it says this was written in 2024, but we'll just take it as is. So, reads, I have long maintained that secondary progressions are the most intimate of the predictive languages, precisely because they refuse spectacle. 1 day equals 1 year, a quiet equation that forces the practitioner to respect the pace of actual maturation. The progressed moon completes a full cycle in roughly 27 years, and the progressed sun advances only 1 degree per year. These are not metaphors for growth, they are growth, compressed to a symbolic scale that the psyche can still feel. Consider the progressed sun changing signs. Students treat it as an event. It is not. It is a slow reorientation of the life force itself, the gradual discovery that the old solar style no longer carries the same voltage. When my own progressed sun crossed from Virgo into Libra in the late 1990s, the analytical precision that had served me for decades did not vanish. It simply ceased to be the primary instrument. Relationship, proportion, and the aesthetics of balance began to demand equal rank. The chart did not cause this. The chart recorded the pressure that was already rising from within. And we see here a symbolic midpoint between two progressing bodies. The true genius of the secondary system. The true genius of the secondary system lies in its refusal of external clocks. The solar art directions move everything by the same solar increment. Transits are visitations from outside. Progressions alone keep the natal promise and simply unfold it. They are the chart aging itself. When the progressed moon reaches the natal sun, you do not speak of aspects so much as of a temporary interior conjunction of will and feeling, a month-long and real-time period in which the native may finally act from emotional conviction rather than from strategy. I have watched this configuration coincide with decisions that look impulsive to the outside observer and inevitable to the person living them. On the fifth harmonic and the creative impulse. Harmonic charts remain undertaught because they demand a different kind of seeing. The fifth harmonic, 72 degrees, is the geometry of pure creativity, not the creativity of the artist alone, but the capacity to generate form where none previously existed. When two planets stand in a quintile or biquintile, they share a vibrational signature that the ordinary major aspects do not describe. The mind does not merely combine, it invents. I've spent years examining the fifth harmonic charts of theoretical physicists and of composers who broke their own idioms. The pattern is consistent, a dense web of fifth harmonic linkages between Mercury, Uranus, and the midheaven, frequently with Neptune serving as a subtle amplifier rather than a diluter. The native experiences ideas as arriving already half-formed, as if retrieved rather than constructed. This is not mysticism, it is the phenomenology of a particular angular relationship made conscious. Here we see fifth harmonic geometry, 72 degrees intervals. The practical implication is severe. If a client's fifth harmonic chart is empty of significant linkages, one should not promise creative breakthroughs under transit. The soil is not prepared. Conversely, when the fifth harmonic is richly aspected, even modest transits to the natal planets involved can release disproportionate originality. The astrologer's task is to recognize the difference between potential and pressure. And for entry 3, we are going to look at fixed stars in the finger of God, or Yod. You guys are probably very familiar with this. So, a Yod is not a crisis configuration, it is a demand for specialized adaptation. Two planets in sextile both form quincunxes to a third, the apex. The apex planet must constantly adjust, never settling into the comfort of the opposition or the easy flow of the trine. When a major fixed star sits near the apex, the demand becomes archetypal rather than merely personal. This is the Yod finger of God, and here is a grand trine for contrast. So, I once examined a chart in which the apex of a Yod involving Mars and Neptune was conjunct Regulus. The natives spent 3 decades attempting to reconcile martial drive with oceanic empathy, always under the quiet pressure of royal fixed star expectation. The resolution never arrived as a single event. It arrived as a vocation that required both surgical precision and radical compassion. Trauma, surgery, and conflict zones, the Yod did not cause the vocation. It described the precise tension that only that vocation could metabolize. Fixed stars are not personality traits, they are points of archetypal density. When they touch the angles or the lights, the life is asked to carry mythic charts that ordinary planetary placements do not impose. The responsible faculty member does not romanticize this. We note the pressure, we name the possible channels, and we remain silent about destiny. The nodes as evolutionary vector, the lunar nodes, are not about past lives in the popular sense. They are about the direction of least resistance versus the direction of necessary growth. K2 describes the gravitational pull of what the soul already knows how to do, often with excellence and often with unconsciousness. Rahu is the unfamiliar competence that must be practiced until it becomes second nature. This is evolutionary, not moral. We see K2, we see Rahu, and in the middle, the axis of becoming. When the nodes are tightly squared by Mars or Saturn, the evolutionary vector meets resistance that is structural rather than psychological. The native cannot simply choose Rahu. The choice must be enacted against real friction, family systems, economic constraints, bodily limitation. In such charts, K2 often becomes a place of refuge. That is also a place of stagnation. The faculty's task is to help the client distinguish safety from growth without shaming the need for safety. And we see, I no longer use the language of karmic debt. The notes describe a vector, not a ledger. The soul is not paying, the soul is orienting. That distinction alone has spared many clients years of unnecessary guilt. Right here is the Grand Cross as containment structure. Popular astrology treats the Grand Cross as crises. I have come to regard it as architecture. 4 planets in mutual square in opposition create a closed system of tension that paradoxically can stabilize a life that would otherwise dissipate. The energy has nowhere to leak. It must be lived through the 4 modalities or elements involved. Grand Cross, closed tension system. So in the charts of long-distance runners, certain military strategists, and a surprising number of hospice workers, I find Grand Crosses that function as internal scaffolding. The native does not experience perpetual crises. The native experiences a permanent demand for integration. When one planet of the cross is activated by transit, the entire structure vibrates. The art is to teach the client to feel the vibration as information rather than as threat. A cardinal Grand Cross asks for initiation under pressure. A fixed Grand Cross asks for endurance that does not calcify. A mutable Grand Cross asks for adaptability that does not become evasion. The mode of the cross is more diagnostic than the planets themselves. And closing notes on method. After 4 decades of practice, I remain convinced that the most advanced technique is still radical listening. Technique without presence becomes decoration. Presence without technique becomes projection. The faculty must hold both. I have watched brilliant students master midpoints, harmonics, tertiary progressions, and the Arabic parts only to lose the client in the elegance of the analysis. The chart is not a puzzle to be solved in front of another human being. It is a shared object that allows 2 people to speak about what is otherwise difficult to name: timing, pressure, gift, and the shape of a life that is not yet fully arrived. These pages are private because the work is private. What is written here is not doctrine. It is the residue of attention paid over many years to the same geometric questions. If any future reader finds a single sentence that sharpens their own seeing, the manuscript has done its work. And that is the end of Volume 1. here is a different Astro Diary. In the same format, though. However, it's titled Celestial Ponderings. An Advanced Astrology Diary, Faculty of Celestial Sciences, Institute for Esoteric and Planetary Studies. The stars do not compel, they inclined. So we see on the architecture of time, Saturn in Aquarius, 29th degree, Moon conjunct Pluto. This is the natal house wheel. Houses in angular positions. So the Saturn return arrives not as punishment, but as the cosmos demanding an accounting, a renegotiation of the self against the architecture of time itself. I have watched this transit now across 40 natal charts, and the pattern never ceases to astonish. At 29 years, the soul must choose whether it will inherit the structure it unconsciously built, or burn it down and begin again with mature intention. What strikes me most profoundly is the way Saturn, that great ring keeper of Kronos, operates simultaneously on the mundane and the archetypal. The client loses a career not because they failed, but because they outgrew the container. The marriage dissolves not from lovelessness, but because the soul has developed past the version of itself that forged that agreement. Saturn is not cruel, Saturn is precise. The 29th degree, the energetic degree, compounds everything. It is as though the planet has metabolized the entire. There is also the matter of the lunar nodes, always in polarity, sign, and in the last breath must transmit the wisdom or lose it, always demanding the individual choose between the comfort utterly. I think of it as a thesis defense. The planet must have origin, and the uncertain luminosity of destiny demonstrate mastery before it crosses the cusp. Saturn return coinciding with the nodal return, as it did for 3 clients this past autumn, produces a crucible effect I can only describe as alchemical. This part fucked me up, because clearly there was an AI hallucination or mistake. Lead into gold is not a metaphor, it is a precise phenomenological description of what the psyche undergoes when cosmic time folds back upon itself at exactly the moment the incarnate self is most vulnerable and most ready. I note in my ephemeris a rare mutual reception forming, Saturn and Aquarius receiving, Uranus and Capricorn's rulership energy, a paradox made manifest, the planet of limits and the planet of liberation. Exchanging thrones, we are in an era where the very concept of structure is being restructured, and we see this planetary aspect web with interconnections in the current sky. Moving on to fixed stars and the memory of the galaxy. Algol, 26 degrees Taurus, Antares, 9 degrees Sagittarius, Regulus, 0 degrees Virgo. The fixed stars are perhaps astrology's most neglected treasure. While we moderns obsess over the moving planets, their transits, their returns, their elegant dances in and out of sign, the great stars stand as geological landmarks in the firmament, ancient beyond reckoning, whispering truths that operate on time scales the human psyche can barely comprehend. Algol, the demon star, Beta Persei, blinking every 2.87 days as its companion eclipses it, sits at 26 degrees of Taurus. To have Algol conjunct your natal moon is not, as the medieval astrologers insisted, a sentence of beheading. It is, I have found, the signature of someone who has survived a rupture so fundamental that ordinary life was permanently divided into before and after. They carry the precious wound, the face of Medusa turned to stone, hangs at their belt, not as burden, but as transmuted power. They see what others cannot bear to see. Diaries, the heart of the Scorpion rival of Mars, whose name means precisely that, is the fixed star most implicated in obsession and the refusal to moderate. The client with Diaries conjunct their natal sun does not do anything halfway. They research until 4 a.m. They love until there is nothing left. They achieve the extraordinary, and then sometimes self-immolate. The question Diaries poses is not whether to burn, but whether the burning serves something greater than the self. Regulus is precession into Virgo, having spent roughly 2,160 years in Leo, perhaps the most cosmically momentous ingress of our era. The royal star, the heart of the lion, now asks us, can power be in service? Can greatness be expressed through discernment, through precision, through the quiet mastery of technique, rather than the roar of domination? We are perhaps in the first century of a new 2,000-year experiment. And here we see the 8 lunar phases, synodic cycle. So you got your new moon, waxing crescent, first quarter, waxing gibbous, full, waning gibbous, last quarter, and the waning crescent. Right. The outer planets and generational fate. So Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were not discovered until humanity was ready for them, not astronomically, but psychologically. Uranus arrived in 1781, the year of the American and French Revolutions, as though the cosmos were announcing The old hierarchies are dissolving. Neptune served as in 1846 the year of ether anesthesia and the spiritualist movement, as though matter itself were becoming permeable. Pluto appeared in 1930, the year the world's economies collapsed and the nuclear age's shadow fell across the future, the underworld quite literally made visible. Here is the solar system, or very schematic, not to scale. The transpersonal planets work not upon the individual so much as through the individual. When Pluto transits your natal sun, you do not merely change, you die and are reborn as something that could not have been predicted from the prior self. The ego that enters a Pluto conjunction is never the ego that exits. What remains is something more essential, stripped of pretension, of borrowed identity, of the comfortable fictions the personality constructs to manage existence. Neptune's transits are subtler and therefore more dangerous. Pluto at least announces itself. Neptune seduces, dissolves, confuses. The client under a long Neptune transit often does not know they are in one until years later. They describe the period as foggy, dreamlike, shot through with unusual beauty and unusual confusion in equal measure. Boundaries became permeable. They could not tell where they ended and another began. This is Neptune's gift and Neptune's danger. The dissolution of the separate self is simultaneously enlightenment and pathology, depending entirely on whether the individual has developed sufficient ego structure to safely loosen it. Uranus alone arrives with a shock of lightning. It is the only outer planet whose transits can be felt on the precise day. An exact Uranus conjunction to the natal ascendant produces, in my clinical experience, an almost physical sensation of electrical charge. The client often describes feeling like they have been struck by an idea so large it reorganizes everything. So here we see Chiron, the wound that teaches. And Chiron occupies the most philosophically complex position in the modern astrological canon, neither purely a planet nor merely an asteroid, but a centaur, an object with the eccentric orbit of the outer solar system and the mythological resonance of someone who lives between worlds. The centaur Chiron was immortal and thus could not die of his wound. He was mortal in his suffering and divine in his wisdom. This paradox is the entire teaching. I have come to believe that the Chiron placement in a natal chart does not describe a simple wound, it describes the very site of one's calling. The pain and the gift emerge from the same coordinates. We see Chiron in Aries, the transit of our present moment, wounds in the domain of will, of selfhood, of the right to exist as an autonomous being. And those born with natal Chiron in Aries often spent childhood being told that their instincts were wrong, their desires selfish, their energy excessive. They learn slowly, painfully, then suddenly that the very intensity they were shamed for is the source of their capacity to ignite others. What fascinates me in clinical work is the way Chiron transits open old wounds, not to torture but to complete unfinished business. When Chiron opposes a client's natal Venus, for instance, every old heartbreak returns, not as repetition but as curriculum. Here the cosmos seems to say is a pattern that you have not yet understood. Here's what you chose and why and what it cost and what it gave. The aim is not healing in the sense of removal. Chiron does not remove wounds but integration. The wound becomes the teaching, the scar becomes the credential. And here we see the element. So for example, fire. With a modality, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Signs, Aries, Leo, Sag. Keywords, will, creativity, and vision. Earth, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, and form, craft, structure. Air, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, mind, relation, ideal. And water, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, soul, power, and dissolution. And here we see the closing reflection on the ethics of StarCraft. I'm sometimes asked whether I believe in astrology. It is the wrong question. I believe in the patterns I have observed across thousands of charts and thousands of hours of conversation. I believe in the correspondence, not causation, between celestial geometry and human experience. The planets do not cause, they reflect, or perhaps they participate in a vast synchrony that the human mind, from its vantage point inside time, perceives as influence. The ethics of this craft demand humility above all. To read a chart is to hold a mirror before someone at a moment when they are invulnerable, searching, in need. The responsibility is profound. I have seen charts used to close possibilities rather than open them, to convince someone their pain is fated rather than comprehensible. This is a corruption of the art. The proper use of astrology is to expand the client's capacity to understand themselves, to name what they already know but cannot articulate, to place the personal within a context that makes it meaningful without making it inevitable. Free will and fate are not opposites. In the astrological worldview, they are the warp and weft of the same cloth. The chart describes the field of probability, psychic terrain, recurring themes that the soul seems to have chosen to explore in this incarnation. What the individual does within that field, how consciously, how courageously, how creatively, is entirely their own. Saturn in the 7th house does not guarantee loneliness, and guarantees that love will be a teacher, and serious and light and worth waiting for. So we see here, this is the personal ephemeris current sky snapshot. And you look at the body, sign, house, beam. So, for example, the sun is 4 degrees Virgo in the 9th house, bringing discernment, synthesis, and service. Moon at 17 degrees Scorpio in the 11th house, depth, transformation, collective. Mercury, 27 degrees Leo, the 8th house, dramatic intellect, probing mind. Venus, 11 degrees Libra. In the 10th house, beauty through balance, public grace. Mars, 3 degrees Gemini in the 6th house, versatile drive, mental action. Jupiter, 15 degrees Taurus in the 5th house, abundance, informed, creative expansion. Saturn at 29 degrees Aquarius in the 2nd house, energetic restructuring of value. Uranus at 26 degrees Taurus in the 5th house, revolution of pleasure and resource. Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces in the 3rd house, dissolving local mind, mystic thought. You see Chiron at 21 degrees Aries in the 4th house. Wound of selfhood meets ancestral root. Thank you for watching this video with peace and love, and I hope to see you in the next one. Piscean out.